Hi, Ann.
Hey, Dole. I was muted. So what is the raised plaza elevation? I don't get that.
You mean how they just reference it and
Yeah,
say,
what's it
yeah,
mean?
well, either way, the plaza is going to have to be higher than the existing grade. It's just a matter of how much. Because you'll remember that, like, the area, like where the honk parking spots are on the west side,
Mm-hmm.
that area, like now, is just low. It doesn't tie into the finished floor elevation. So I think what they're saying is it's going to have to be raised no matter what.
It doesn't look any different than the second one, which is existing. So does it? It looks the
The
same as option two. Go ahead,
the
Eric.
one difference is how they're connecting to the transit area. So that because of that difference, there would potentially need to be a more formal ramp instead of stairs, is what
Okay.
that difference is. And then
Okay.
I have a question with them on the east side of the building. That treatment is different.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's grade related or just showing us a different alternative of how that could be treated.
So are those trees, those blobs? What is that? Those
Um,
green blobs are those trees?
Yes.
yes, I believe
Yeah.
so.
Were there going to be trees on the east?
That they have been being shown in the previous sets of plans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And in terms of like development
Mhm.
requirements for the site, I do think we do need some trees, and so that's a good place for them.
Okay.
Um, but yeah.
Okay. So the only difference really is the how it accesses the Creek Walk Trail.
Yeah. They've
Yeah.
made a couple other like minor changes. But again, I don't know for sure if that is grade or
Mm.
just showing us a different option. Because then the north end, where there that the welcome and orientation node and planting buffer to the north,
Yeah.
that is more off the building on one side or on one option, and then a little bit closer to the building on the other. So, hi
Oh, okay.
Denise.
Okay. Well, hopefully they'll be able to explain this. If anybody else has a chance to look at it. It's yeah. But good. They are making progress, I guess.
Trying to, Anne. So we just wanted to, I'm hoping to give you those plans a little bit earlier, but and know that there's some conversation needed to supplement and support them. But
Right.
um, Josh from DHM and Michaela should be on the call here shortly.
Yeah. And I do see you've got all kinds of shade sails and retractable shades. So yeah, there's a lot here.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
So I'm actually kind of surprised Nancy's doing this. She's got to be at Briarhurst by
Yeah,
5:30.
that will
Oh,
be my request. I'm on
you're
that
on. I got to
that
get
we
out of this.
anyway
What's
we can this
what's
to an
at
hour.
Briarhurst?
The candidate
Yeah,
forum is
I
tonight.
was just looking at the plaza designs, but there you are. Yeah, you'll be you'll be going from one thing to another.
Yeah, this is probably good for me to be here to kind of distract me a little.
Yeah, we're always distracting, so that shouldn't be a problem.
But yeah, I would appreciate it if we could condense tonight to an hour if at all possible. If not, I'll just leave. But yeah, I need to be there a little after 5. So
Yeah, and I've got to go feed kitties before I walk down there. So
Well, then I guess we better get started.
yeah,
yeah, do it.
yeah.
So get going. So it looks like we've got Bill is not able to attend. He's on an airplane from South Carolina, apparently. And Carl, I'm not sure what's going on with Carl. I'm pretty sure I included him on the email. So hopefully he'll join us in a little while. And I think that's pretty much it. Is Tweed with us, Susan? Oh yeah, there she is. I see her shoulder. Um, all right, then let's get going. Any comments on the agenda other than to make it as condensed as possible? I don't see any public, but are there any public comment on anything that's not on the agenda? Hearing nothing. Can I have a motion to approve the October 5th minutes unless
So
there are,
moved.
so moved.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and the October 12th minutes?
Move
So
approval.
moved. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Todd, did you actually read them?
I did not, but I assume they're okay.
They're always okay.
Thank you.
Your
for the
assumption-
welcome.
Your assumption is a good one, but because Susan does take very good minutes, but anyway, okay, moving on. Roof Dole,
So the one contractor that we were trying to solicit information from ended up, and we visited on site, ended up emailing and saying that it's too much and they're not going to be able to put together a proposal for us after all. And they suggested that we reach out to a different roofing company again. So I feel like we as a task force need to make a decision if we want to keep pursuing this or if we just want to let the roof get wrapped up in the major renovation project.
I think that's the best option, the second one.
I do too.
The roof, as facilities, we'll continue to monitor the building and inspect it to make sure that there's no leaks or anything happening. But it's just been, and I think with all the hail damage that happened, 3 months ago, I think the roofing companies are just, their time is being used elsewhere. Okay.
all right, moving on. Anything new on the floodplain?
Regarding the
When do we-
floodplain, well, the surveyor went out early this week and verified some survey elevations and the finished floor elevations of the site, and then sent those to DHM, and we've heard back from their floodplain person already. So there seems to be some elevation differences between FEMA's data and what we're actually showing there. But for what it's worth, we're working on it and making progress.
Okay, and when do we expect it to be done? I know I always ask that, but
That's a good question. I would have to ask the civil engineer what they're thinking, because we have to basically figure out where the data is different and then adjust accordingly. So I think it's weeks, Nancy, it's not months.
okay.
And this
we-
is separate from the earthwork, right? This is just a whole separate discussion, right?
That's right. It's specific to the Old Man's Trail Bridge and
Okay,
those elevations and the floodway elevation through there.
okay.
Okay, moving on, CDOT grant, Dole, you did email us, and good news, bad news is, go ahead.
Bad news is that we did not get the grant. They wanted it to be like shovel ready within 12 months. Good news is they liked it. Good news is I have an appointment with them Tuesday morning to discuss the grant with them. And what I really want to ask them is, if we had been more shovel ready, would we have been a good candidate for that grant? So, the nice thing is we've done kind of the hard work of getting this together. They're aware of us. And so I'll just chat with them and just kind of get a brief, where were we strong, where were we weak? And then their other comment was, we talked about this, but to not mention anything about the historic building. So when we resubmit, we'll really just focus on just the transit and mobility elements of the project.
Yeah, and we had talked about that when we were submitting.
Right. And
So-
and everything was specific to mobility and transit, but
Because it's context.
yeah, it's exactly right. It was context to show that we had a whole site and a whole plan and a whole emphasis, but they were just looking through their mobility lens. So next time we submit it, I'll ask them when the next, I tried to look at the website, it didn't show yet. It was still showing the late September deadline. So they hadn't updated their website, yes, with the next grant cycle.
Okay, next are the scheduled briefings, and this is what I could discern, and I kind of just try to summarize all the upcoming dates of things that we're aiming for. So Aaron, I don't know if you had a chance to look at these to see if these are now that we're not going to do the roof repair anytime quickly, we could take that November 1st date off. And Dole, you just have to be prepared to answer council's questions as to why that roof is going to stay like it is. 'Cause
Understand.
that is a risk for us not to do that. We've been, as you know, we brought that up multiple times. But Aaron, the rest of it, does that look fairly?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think the one thing I would maybe want to just like qualify is the term final approval. I think maybe saying approval of the final site plan might make more sense because we still would need to go back for the major development plan. And for HPC, I think there's going to be a few more things that as Todd and his team are working through the design and adding details to the historic that I think HPC would want to understand and be able to review. So I think, yeah, definitely sort of approving that final site plan as the full final site plan, but we would still have to go back for the major development plan and that type of approval, an interior and exterior for HPC.
Thanks. And I do have a couple of question marks in there. The first is report to City Council on the earthworks, and just to Denise, that you'll need to be engaged on that because if it comes back that the funding or the cost to just do the move the earth around to protect the building is less than it would cost to move the building, to raise the building. The two options are we can raise the building or just move earth around to protect everything. And if one of those comes out substantially different, then we don't feel that we need to go to council. We can just send them an email and tell them that this is what our, how we're going forward. If it's very close, if those costs are very close, what would your recommendation be?
I think if they're close, you would want to go to council.
Okay.
But it sounds like there's going to be a big difference in cost is what I'm assuming. I think then an email from me stating this is what they have found, here is the recommendation, and we'll either move forward with this or reach out to the mayor if you want to talk about it in the future.
Okay, and that was kind of our thought as well. So we're in alignment on that. Thank you. So
could I ask a question? Just real quick, it sounds like you're going to have to go back to the new council then to get the final review. Is that correct based on what Aaron?
Well, no, we're looking for final, and that's something I want to get to it. I don't know if you have the agenda in front of you or not, Denise, but all the dates are pretty much laid out, but we were looking to on December 19th to come to council for the final, as Aaron just said, the correct wording would be the final site plan, approval of the final site plan. Do I have that right, Aaron?
That's correct, because we would come back to them again for the major development plan approval.
Right. So we're looking at on December 19th.
And then January and February would be the major development plan then. Or probably more February would be a major development plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were pretty much just aiming at this point to get through the final site plan approval with this council, just because this council is much more familiar with everything. And this is probably the bigger issue. With the development plan will hopefully be less so. And then the other, hopefully, because then it's kind of out of the task force hands. It really goes into staff hands at that point. The planning commission, though, Aaron, I didn't know what date to put down for that, because that would have to be done before. Would that have to be done before? December 19th?
I'm not 100% certain on that, since it's not necessarily, I'll say, a formal approval the way a major development plan is. We wouldn't need to go through HPC, or if we want to classify this as a concept plan, which we did just take before before CPC, sort of the concept of it. I think that could be appropriate, in which case we could take that before them on, let's see, December 13th would be when we would take it to CPC and just get their recommendations on a concept plan.
What's the task force's thoughts, Anne?
My question would be, did we do that with the library? I didn't think so.
I don't recall, but I don't remember seeing that. Denise is nodding her head yes. So
yeah, and we went through everything before we took anything to council. So it went to planning, it went to HPC and council was the final one to approve the final plan. Now, before we did back and forth and there was some opportunity, but council had the final review of that to approve. I'm pretty sure, and I'd have to go back and look, but I think we did.
Okay, and that may be true, but I think that's after the major development, which Planning Commission would approve. And as Aaron said, this sort of approval of the design is, I think, a preliminary step. And then at the very end, when HPC is signed off on everything, Planning Commission has approved the major development, then it would go, I guess, back to council for their final kind of check off, right?
They have to approve all major development plans. It has to go to council.
Okay,
And then, as you know, HPC is just an advisory board. They
Yeah.
only give recommendation. Council has to approve everything at the end.
yeah, not on HPC. On the only thing that council can approve, has to approve on HPC is demolitions. Everything else, we make the final decision, and only if it's appealed to council do they get involved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just to kind of clarify language, HPC is reviewing and approving a material change of appearance certification. CPC and City Council would be approving the major development plan. City Planning Commission is considered the recommendation body for that, and then City Council is the sort of decision-making body on that. So they're kind of going like this because they're looking at different things.
Good point.
So-
Aaron.
If that helps.
You put these timelines together before and we've had some changes, or we've had more specificity to our dates. So my question is, it seems like to me that it would be worth it to go as at a minimum an information briefing on December 13th to Planning Commission, but I don't want to get outside the normal ways of doing things.
I think it can be classified as a concept plan, because I think that's more where we're at information wise as a task force, and we've done that. It's allowed in the new code on more complex projects so that the Planning Commission is aware and can sort of give their feedback on the direction it's heading. Recently we had one on that concept design, and they said, hey, here are concerns that aren't addressed based on the current level of finish of the project. We wouldn't sort of approve it as it currently is because of these concerns, or we would. But it's not a decision that stops the project from moving forward or prevents anything from a major development plan. It's just an opportunity for them to formally record any comments and concerns before getting to the level of detail of the major development plan. So I think it could be appropriate, assuming.
So my recommendation is we go forward with these dates as listed here to get everything scheduled. Is everyone in agreement with that, or does anyone have any concerns with that?
Nancy, does that include going to Planning Commission on the 13th?
Yeah,
Okay, with a concept plan?
yeah.
Yep, okay.
The only question I have, and at last meeting, I thought I remember going in front of the public again, not the Planning Commission or the City Council, with our
Yeah, we're doing that on November 30th.
okay.
So it's November 30th, the public, November or December 6th, HPC, December 13th, Planning Commission, and December 19th, Council.
And that's on the plaza and kind of building connections. My only concern is knowing that we had identified about a 6-week turnaround with Olson, our civil engineer, once they had the kind of survey clarified, and we've had that this week. So
That's a good point, Todd. We did say that if the earthworks, this schedule depends on the earthworks, which we were expecting back on about November 2nd, I thought.
That's separate, I think, than what Todd's talking about, right?
Correct. The earthwork piece, with the survey just being confirmed this week, that would push us potentially, and we can ask our civil to try to shorten their timeline, but the timelines they've given us previously was a 6-week turnaround from once they had the survey confirmed. So that pushes us not a final recommendation from our civil team on the earthwork piece until I'm looking at that November 30th timeframe. So that's my only concern. I can begin to reach out and see if we can tighten that time frame up. Knowing
Yeah,
that
but
we're trying to.
I think this goes back to what we've been talking about, that when we say to council for final concept approval, you know, without doing a full 50% construction drawings, we won't know all of those details. We're really looking to go to council then for them to say, yes, this is the layout of generally the layout of the site and of the facility, how we want it to go. Everyone knows that as we develop the construction drawings, some of those details will, modify and change and adjust. I think this is really a 2D, a plan view discussion.
So we
Okay.
would take the earthwork later, and
It would be
able
nice.
to take it at all.
It would,
Is that
yes,
what-
correct. It would be nice if we were able to prepare the memo and send the memo as soon as it's ready for the file, basically to council or through Denise. And then on the 19th, we don't even have to reference it. We would just say, here's our proposed site concepts. And to tell them that we still will come back for the major development permit at least 50% construction drawings.
Which
Yeah,
would include a grading and erosion control review
Yep.
permit.
Exactly.
And
So my question is, how do we go to the public on November 30th without knowing whether we're going to propose that we raise the building? We can't do that.
We're hoping to have the answer 2 weeks before that, and we're hoping.
I didn't hear Todd say that. I heard
November
Todd say
30th.
not till November 30th.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Are
So
we misunderstanding you, Todd, or what?
no, that's the concern. I think we'd have Josh is here from DHM. I feel like we're going to be in a good spot for plaza layout and coordination with building. Well in advance of the earthwork change. And so we'll have something that we can easily present for the public hearing, but I don't think we're going to be potentially we're not going to be at a good point on the earthwork to share to the public on November 30th.
And I don't think we want to go back to the public twice. I mean, I think we need to know before we go back for the final information briefing to the public, whether there's any chance that we'll be raising the building, because that's not a trivial thing.
right, and this pushes this because this is not what I understood previously in terms of dates. So I'm a bit discouraged to hear this upheaval now. I thought we had discussed it as a group, all these dates previously, and had pretty much said that November 2nd was when we were expecting the earthworks to be presented to task force. So again, it's a bit discouraging, and it seems to blow our schedule right out of the water.
I think it does, yeah. I mean, I think if that's the reality, then we need to redo our schedule, because we can't go to the public without having that decision nailed.
Could we delay?
Well, I continue to looking at the grades out there. I mean, raising the building up 18 inches is a big deal regarding the building, right? Because then we pull it out of the floodplain, and there's future flood benefits, but it comes at a pretty significant cost.
A very significant cost.
Right,
Yes.
correct, which we're still trying to work. But I guess I keep going back to the term concept. We're not showing a grading plan to council. We're just showing this is how we want the site to function and operate, knowing that, a planter might be 6 inches higher in the air, but we still want to have a planter box. We could even pull up those conceptual drawings from them.
So Dole, I will guarantee you that if we go to the public and tell them this is our concept plan, no discussion of whether or not we raise the building, a month down the road, we say, guess what? We're going to raise the building 2 feet out of the ground. They're going to go nuts.
Yeah, but Ann, what we
cannot
would
do
do is this is how it tweaks the concept plan accordingly.
I totally
No.
disagree.
Okay,
So I have a
wait,
question.
One at a time, please. Erin, you've had your hand up.
I think maybe we segue, and maybe not, but Susan and Tweed, you'd brought up, at the last meeting, that maybe as a task force, we're not all on the same page in terms of what we're hoping to get out of that public engagement meeting. So putting maybe raising the building aside for the second, what do we want to get out of that meeting? What level of responsiveness or type of input are we looking for from the public? And then that might help us clarify when this occurs before or after that building being raised.
B4. Thank you.
Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. That's an important discussion, but I'm afraid it's more complicated than just deciding in a couple of minutes. We'd need to have a full discussion. But what if we delayed the open house by a week? What if we had it on December 7th? So the only problem is that's a day after HPC. Or what if we had it on December, whatever the Tuesday is before, or the Monday is before HPC? That would be the 4th, I guess. Could we have an answer, Todd, by then? December 4th? Well, we'd also need time to make a decision.
Yeah.
Right. And we may have questions.
But I think, Erin, to your point, I think whether it's public information or public engagement, we need to have the full information.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't, I agree with Ann wholeheartedly, we shouldn't come back and say, oh yeah, well, we forgot to tell you, we're gonna raise the building 18. That's not, no, I just think we need to.
Here's my recommendation is that Todd, you and Dole, going through you to the contractor, but Todd, you said that you would look into if we could compress the timeline because they've had it for several weeks now, and just come back. I'm thinking we may need over the next few weeks to go back to meeting weekly as a task force just to get through this timeline. And Todd, if you could come back next week and let us know where we are with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can relook the dates, and I'm hoping that I'm not saying this just because of my own time pressure today, but I don't think we're in a position where we can really make a whole lot of determinations on the timeline. And again, I don't want to overly we need to move this project along, and we keep coming up with these unknown or unpredicted delays. Denise, you had a question?
Yeah, I just would share my experience with the library, which is different, but I will tell you the civil engineers and the surveyors and thing, we thought it would take 2 weeks. It ended up taking like 10 weeks. Everybody is backlogged. I think, Todd, you can say that it's hard to get them there. And if you push too hard, they will quit, is what we found. And so if you're expecting it done in 4 weeks, I would plan on 8 weeks. And that's what we found with the library is you really have to give them the time to do their job, or else it will come back and you'll find that you have other issues. So just from experience, I don't think you'll be able to get it done in a tight time frame.
Hey,
And
Yeah, and I would suggest this is just all too tight. I think we just step back. There's no reason why this can't move into January. If it's a new council, so be it. It doesn't matter. I think we just redo our time frame given when we have a realistic estimate of when we're going to get the earthwork answer and slip this a month.
And I don't necessarily have a problem with that, Ann, but it just seems to me that everything keeps slipping a month here, a month there, et cetera, et cetera. And it's been, I mean, we've lost a year and a half, I think, at least on this project. And it's getting quite frustrating. Some of it our fault, some of it not our fault. So I think we need to set goals and try to stick with them. So I would like to come back next week and just get another look at where we're standing.
so Nancy, let me share my screen real quick. I want to further elaborate on my point of what I'm trying to make here. So you guys can see this design concept here in Bluebeam. So I calibrated the drawing to the right scale, and then I just measured, right? So the topic of discussion is if this building here is raised up 18 inches, what does it do? So an 18-inch over 75, almost 76 feet is 2%. So I don't know what the existing grade would be without raising the building. But if we raised the building up 18 inches, it only changes the site by 2% from the street to the front door. Now, over 76 feet, you know, that's a good positive drainage and very accessible and within the ADA requirements. So my point is, and I think raising or not raising the building is an enormously big deal, but how does it affect? So my point of this is that 2% slope. I'm suggesting, I meant to do a line, has a very nominal effect on this planter box is my point. Like, I'm okay showing the community a planter box there because it's a 2% across that difference between whether that building gets raised or not. So at that distance, that planter box is either 3 or 4 inches higher. So that's my point, that raising the building is a huge deal, but how it affects the site, I'm saying is not as big of a deal.
And that's fine, Dole, but that's an engineering perspective, and that's not the community perspective. So you can tell us that until we all fall asleep. That's not the issue.
Right.
The issue is we cannot go back to the public
Right.
without knowing the answer to that question.
Right.
Period.
Okay, so Anne, your point is that the building, raising or not the building, is its own community moment.
It is
Like,
a major issue
okay, so
that has
really,
to be resolved before we give the final project to the community.
so regardless of how it does not affect the plaza, just that's such a big decision. It's like a critical path item to you.
It is a critical path
Okay,
item, and
and
the
that-
cost, which we don't yet have, I
Correct.
suspect is very critical.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me.
And it's about transparency. If you all of a sudden decide that you're going to raise the building, you're going to have a very difficult time fundraising or even to keep this project going because the public is not going to trust. They're going to go, this was not discussed, we didn't know about it, and all of a sudden they just made the decision on their own. So it's really about transparency and building trust with our community.
Yeah.
Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, Denise, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the previous comments on allowing the civil engineer to kind of do their work. I do want to just last comment on the schedule piece in terms of I will reach out just to Olson just to see about if they can condense their schedule at all. Yes, they have had a direction to kind of do some things, but the challenge that they're up against is they don't know. There's been too many discrepancy between the finished floor elevation on the FEMA survey versus the survey they've had in the past. So it could be 18 inches, it could be 6 inches, it could be 24 inches. And so that difference on a civil plan makes a big difference to design too. So I think that the survey that Dole was able to get the surveyor on site this week is the critical piece to allow our team to kind of keep moving forward. So yeah, I'll ask about the condensing their schedule, and we'll at least be able to give you some more information hopefully by tomorrow on whether or not that's possible to condense that at all.
So, I'm hearing a lot of
Bill,
from else, but anyway, background noise and seeing up Bill's nostrils and in his ear there.
Yeah.
can Bill,
Anyway, all right. So I would suggest that we put this topic on hold for the moment. Is everyone okay with meeting more frequently over the next, until we get these things decided and get things moving? So we'll briefly meet next week, hopefully, and we'll move on from this discussion today, but it'll have time for people to think about it some more. All right, is there any other updates that anybody has? Hearing none, and welcome Carl and Bill. I'm glad you're both able to make it. Plaza design, that was sent out to us right before our meeting. So I guess BVA is gonna fill us in on what's going on with the plaza design.
Absolutely. And I'm going to let Josh from DHM drive the presentation today, and hand it over to him. They've been working hard. Both myself and DHM was really appreciative of all the comments that you all provided I think it was mid last week. It was just great information, and appreciated the thoughtfulness and care that was handed over to us. So thank you for the time spent on consolidating all those the comments.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Todd. Are you guys looking at my desktop, or are you seeing my PDF screen? I might have the wrong one.
PDF screen.
Okay, making sure I had the right thing here. Well, perfect. I think what we just talked about, even too, with looking at raising the building and implications on the site and how that would impact it, was a great kind of targeted discussion. I think we can maybe step back just a moment here as we talk about, as Todd just said, the feedback we received from you guys, and then what we want to talk about and present today. So I'll try to go through everything I have all at once, just to be efficient with our time, and then we can certainly circle back on any comments or questions you guys have as you digest. So I wanted to start really quickly. This was the feedback we had received from you guys on the last go around. We looked at some of that programmatic diagramming. I thought that was really helpful for us to understand the things you guys did and did not necessarily like, as far as how we were laying out design elements and how the program would work. We heard from option one that sort of play and sculpture and art component near the entry was really nice. That open plaza connection to the building. Option two, some of the challenges there with how the transit and the circulation was going to move through the site. And then that option three, some of those planters and garden beds that were defining spaces more appropriately for how we could separate areas of the plaza. And so, again, I know you guys put these together. They were tremendously helpful. I just wanted to quickly review them to see kind of where we built off of what you guys had already looked at. And so really keeping that transit on that west edge, looking at that play, art, and sculpture components that are up sort of near that entrance, that large open area that connects to the building in the center, smaller group gathering areas towards the creek, and then there's going to be some sort of creek connection component as well. And so I know we quickly just looked at these when Dole pulled them up. So this is sort of, we have two concepts we wanted to go over today. They're sort of variations, and I know we're going to table this conversation, but this one is sort of looking at a raised plaza elevation that would correlate with a building that's also raised. And then the other one we're going to look at is if we were to keep at an existing elevation for the plaza. Really, the implications between the two, there will be some, of course, depending on how much the building varies. We really need to get into the weeds a bit more with a civil engineer, but at a high level of where we're at now with just sort of concept, the differences we were sort of looking at is on that western edge is, would there still be a need to keep that ramp and sort of those connections that would bring the plaza up to Old Man's Trail? Or if there is some sort of raising of the plaza, and that does bring you up higher to grade with Old Man's Trail, how does that work a little bit? And how do we have a little bit more space? So here for concept one, just want to quickly run through these. We just threw some splashes of color so you could understand it, but really we wanted to express that we're imagining sort of a mix of those nice earth tones and those colors that you see throughout Manitou with some of the stonework. And then we see opportunities, as you guys have pointed out, through some of the precedent images for really vibrant art and sculptural pieces that can complement all throughout. So I think that's definitely a consistent thing that we would get a bit more into. And I think these images on the screen will help, but just know that there would certainly be a good mix of color and vibrancy and sort of the whimsical character, and then also matching sort of the historic elements of the site itself. So this concept one, we looked at some of these raised bed planters. I wanted to kind of start maybe up here in the north, looking at sort of those connections over from Memorial Park. We sort of see this area as a welcome and orientation. You know, there's an idea of some sort of wayfinding or art component. There could be sort of these planters that maybe have some seating in them, keeping some of the open space as that connects to the building. And then on that north side, we were looking at these vertical bike storage units that would actually stack up against the building. So you're being efficient with your space, but allowing for some of that transit storage that we need to try to think about. As you move down, looking through, we like the idea of having that centralized art sort of play component. I think the images over here that we had, this is the Pearl Street Mall in Boulder, is kind of an idea that could work with something that is both sculptural as well as playful for kids. Down below there in the second image, I believe that's Fort Collins. And so I think what we like about those spaces is they do a really good job of mixing both user groups as well as different experiences for people who want sitting, people who want to see art, and then those, of course, who want to play. Another thing I want to point out that's kind of common in all these plans, and this would definitely tie into any elevation changes, is right now we have these planters drawn. You can see there's some areas where we're imagining some sort of seating, whether that's a connection of a seat bench or even just a raised planter wall that you could sit on. And then I think there are opportunities where other sides of the planter could be flush curbs. So you have a little bit of a variation in height, but that also allows for more access to some of the pollinator garden ideas or sort of that vegetation that's more accessible to people that's not necessarily in a raised planter. Moving down, we're going to talk a little bit more about the flexible space in general in a minute here, but with this one, we had this idea of sort of staggered benches along that creek edge and some art and interpretative signage that could be sort of at a creek overlook. The idea there could be something like of this character where you have sort of these unique or custom design seating arrangements that would kind of give this vibrant edge where you could look out over the creek. And so those are sort of some of the bigger highlights we had for concept 1 here. Again, concept 2 is going to look somewhat familiar. I think the differences here is we were thinking more of how do you incorporate that ramp if the plaza stays at the existing grade. So that kind of starts to stack a little bit more of our transit hub items, the bike storage lockers, the bicycle racks on that western edge. And then, you know, we wanted to look at something a little bit different down by the creek. And so we thought maybe this would be an opportunity for picnic tables and more of a group seating based on that edge. It could even be an extension of the covered breezeway. And then rather than art or interpretive signage, maybe there's a river overlook where you can just have a really good view to look throughout the creek down and about. A subtle variation on this one as well, actually on the east side, trying to think about how we could activate that space. Looking over at these planters here, we thought, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to extend those planters and have more plantings within those tree beds. Whereas on the first option, we thought maybe there's an opportunity for some bench seating that could help for events or some of that queuing, or if you're exiting an event, a seating area as you wait for the car pickup or something like that. And so those are sort of some of the variations between these options, again, being mindful of the elevation. And then what we really wanted to dive into a little bit more is how we're imagining that flexible space and then some ideas for shade. And so what we did here was just some quick studies of how that flexible space could be used in different applications for you guys. You know, moving from top left to bottom, you know, the one idea could be bringing in movable tables and chairs. You can see we've got some quantities here, just so you can understand how many you could fit in that space, possibly even more. You know, if there was a need or desire, we've heard before, the idea of a farmer's market or even tents, you know, looking at 12 tents could be stacked in this area with 10-foot wide aisles. And so just a different application of how that space could be used. You know, people love games. And so we thought there's an opportunity for cornhole or the ladder games and sort of how does that arrangement look? And so, you know, you could fit a bunch of movable games that could be set up in evenings or something like that. And then sort of a larger component would be if there is a desire, or, you know, we've heard of the idea of maybe some more formalized concert events. And so, you know, what would that stage setup look like? How could this be oriented? And then maybe how many user groups could fit? And so with this idea, we're looking at about 66 seats could fit in this area. Of course, all of this is flexible and could be, you know, modified. It's just we're trying to figure out how this space could be used differently, and, you know, sort of what future program could be. The last component of that flexible space we wanted to talk about is shade. We know we've heard from both the community as well as the task force. There is certainly a desire for shade, especially as some of those trees are young and need to mature. And so we like the idea of something that could be potentially more temporary. So something that we're thinking about is sort of shade sails, or a retractable shade element. And so this sort of hatching area on each plan is, if you kind of imagine, would be the area that could potentially be covered. And then we've pulled some precedent imagery to try to give you an idea of what that could feel like as well in that space. And so one option would be just sort of your traditional shade sails that connect to these big posts. You know, if we wanted different layers of shade, maybe I'm thinking, you know, this could even cover or define some of those areas for those tents in the farmers market scenario. You could do retractable shade, so they actually have these ones where you could have the shade retract during colder months if you want that sun to warm you, and then it could come out and you could extend them during the day in the hot summer months as well. And then finally, we like the idea, trying to be mindful of keeping that space open and not having too many posts that fit in the middle of a sort of fabric canopy shade that would be cantilevered. And so in this idea, we're thinking you could take a post that has these structural components that hang over. And so maybe these posts even sit within the planters, and that frees up that space pretty nicely, I think. And one thing we liked about this too is, you know, some of the materials and manufacturers we saw have these different shapes and sizes you could use. And we happened to notice that this one looks somewhat familiar, and kind of mimics a little bit of what the historic shade structures used to be there. Obviously, different times and different materials, but there could be some sort of shade we imagine that could complement the historic shade structures that were on the site. So those are the big picture items. I wanted to get a teeny bit more into shade. This might be getting a little bit more into the weeds, but we wanted to show you a little bit of how these different elements could feel based on day and time of year. This is just an overall view, high picture, but getting a little bit more into the understanding. So that first option with those shade sails, you know, you can see both from plan view as well from a perspective view how the shadows would cast onto the plaza and provide shade for visitors and users through the different times of the year. So up in the top, we're looking at March, looking at the middle of summer in July over in the top right, September, kind of the fall, and then winter down in the bottom right. And so these are just some quick studies we did to try to understand how we're casting shade, how it would be used, and just a different understanding. You know, shade is obviously something we want to think about three-dimensionally. It's hard to see and plan. This is sort of the same idea, looking at those retractable items, how those would work, how those could work. And then lastly, those cantilevered ones. So you can see the nice part about these is if we had a cantilever component, you really do keep that open space in the middle with no posts that would divide it up. So I know that was a lot of information. Wanted to make sure we gave some time for comment at the end. If anybody has any initial questions or wants me to flip back through, please let me know.
How wind resistant are any of these concepts?
For the shade, it's a good question. Yeah, so all of these are, you know, different applications. We use these all the time. There's a company called Landscape Structures that designs them specifically for areas that experience high winds. And so we've seen a lot of these, and we've done a lot of these in parks all throughout the Front Range, also in Wyoming. And so I think, you know, I can't give you the numbers off the top of my head, but we could certainly still use any of these applications and make sure that they're very, very wind tolerant.
Great, thanks.
Josh, I was just gonna have you talk a little bit more. There was a couple of art pieces that we talked about when we last spoke, like the back wall of the
Yeah.
For lack of better words, the back wall of the stage, the bike racks, like even those columns of those sails could be those quirky colors like you're showing there. They don't have to be, or there can be places, you know, where we have our hanging planters for those columns as well, so they could serve double duty, both as a structure for shade as well as a playful element, or as a more vegetation. So any other pieces like that you want to highlight, Josh?
Yeah, good point, Todd. I think there really is a vast variety of how we can incorporate art, which we know is a really strong desire of the community. I think as Todd just said, there would be opportunities to do that on, you know, the structural posts for the shade canopies. I think we could incorporate that into obviously the art sculpture components. With both of these options, we were thinking each zone certainly has some art pieces, and then, you know, even thinking about some of those site amenities like the bike lockers, we think, you know, we've seen examples where you could illustrate and have those colorful or have art on one side. And so I think there really is an opportunity for art in just about any part of this space, if you think about it, really, with the idea of murals or installations, potentially even on, you know, the side of the building, within the planters, some of the structural components, and then, you know, even the furniture. I think we had one image that you guys had suggested with even colorful movable furniture. So in our opinion, I think we could really incorporate art just about everywhere. And I think that would certainly be something we explore much more as we dig a little bit deeper.
Comments for Josh? Thoughts? Questions?
Question, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I know, like, on one of the first diagrams you showed, there was kind of like an arrow trying to show expected flow of, you know, the bus transit traffic and all that. Has there been any discussion or thought about trying to like with the solid surface to help reinforce those various traffic zones from the Creek Walk Trail or from transit or from the parking lot to the transit, as opposed to like the play area or the flex space?
Yeah, great question. I think a part of that, Carl, is, you know, first off, there's a few unknowns still, right? Like, we know there's an idea that this creek connection could potentially come from that southwest corner. We don't necessarily know when or how that looks, but I think what we've sort of envisioned is that a lot of that transit, those users who are really coming via bike, via foot, who are using this as that transit hub, are still oriented along that sort of western edge of the site. And what I think helps, as we've sort of dove a little bit deeper, is using these planters to sort of define spaces. I think really will help navigate people as well. And so between signage and wayfinding and sort of the visual cues of how spaces are separated, we're thinking that would be really helpful to understand, okay, I'm coming up to this area. It's obviously a public space. Okay, great. I have direct access to all of those bike racks as well as the storage. And so we did talk a little bit about that and understanding the importance of keeping those items visible on that western edge. So people who are coming from either the west or the south potentially can see the connection to where they're trying to safely store their bike. And so I think those are sort of some of the circulation items from the bicycle perspective. Something we thought was really important from a pedestrian level is that connection to Memorial Park. We know people are there all the time. We know people come over and flood into this area as they wait. And so we wanted to keep that area sort of just below the parking here as more of welcome, orientation, and navigation. And we wanted to keep that direct access to the building as well. And so it's clear, you know, there is a building that you can enter, but, you know, I think the planters and the idea of defining those spaces helps orient folks to understand that that could be also used outside here as sort of a waiting area. So we're trying to capture that with shade, with potential seating areas, and hopefully keeping that movement on that west side as well. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, one quick follow-up question. The other point of potential confusion, right? In Manitou, it's officially illegal to ride your bike on the sidewalk. And so, you know, if the bike racks are, you know, kind of, you have to go around the transit hub or whatever to get there, is the expectation that cyclists are going to walk their bikes there? And, you know, it's the convenience factor.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it would have to be a dismount zone for sure, as you enter this plaza, for safety of just people walking by foot. And so
So then access off of Old Man's Trail is going to be more critical potentially. But
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. You know, with us putting the exterior bathrooms on that north side of the building, I think a lot of people, when they get out of their car, and the parking lot is generally to the north and to the east of the site, they will tend to pop into those bathrooms. That'll collect them onto that sidewalk. And then as they walk west to go to the bus station, they're going to hit a pretty aggressive pinch point at that 7 foot 8 inch mark there in that top the top west corner of the site. Yes. And that is going to be one of the highest volume walkways. And I know that we've been, this is not part of your scope necessarily, but as I'm thinking about this, that's going to be a pretty high volume area. And Todd, maybe, I don't know if it'd be worth, this is a little bit, I don't know if we could maybe shift those spots over a little bit to the west and make that bigger, because we're going to have a lot of crossing traffic coming through there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Joel. We've been noticing that as well. It definitely is a pinch point, and there's going to be a lot of circulation through there. I think I have potentially some concerns of shifting west just because there is that direct connection to the Memorial Park right there where the crosswalk is. And you know, currently there is the little retaining wall behind the bus stop. So I think there's definitely still people flowing through here, and you know, maybe to your point, maybe there's a happy medium where we can shift it slightly and we open up a bit more space here, but we're mindful of the space on the west side. I think the other alternative would be potentially seeing if there's a opportunity to, I don't want to say reevaluate parking because we've looked at that quite a bit, but maybe there's a chance that we could shift one of those accessible stalls. You can see obviously the requirements for the aisles needed and sort of the van accessible stall as well, which is that first stall right here on the east. So
if we could make that at least 10 feet wide, I think that would be, you know, that would be a good goal to allow two-way multimodal traffic through there.
Okay, that's it. That's great.
Question.
Sure.
Does Bill have a question? I can't tell if you're raising your hand or just tapping your phone, Bill.
Yeah, I do have a question. Have you considered movable planter boxes in key spots to eliminate the pinch point problem? Because I noticed that there's a tree and a planter area just to the south of those accessible stalls. And it strikes me that if we could move that around with a forklift or something, that might work, and we could accommodate just about anything without having a bunch of pinch points.
I guess my question with that, and maybe this is something we can ask Parks and Rec, is with if it were to have a tree in it, I know the longevity on trees and movable planters is maybe less desirable, but that's something we can ask Jillian about, if that's something that the Parks and Rec department, because that would be a major kind of maintenance question, because if it's movable, that also puts challenges for irrigation connections into that spot.
Sure.
But
And
I
maybe-
mean, I think if right now that pathway to the north, to your point, Bill, is about 7 feet wide, so maybe an 8-foot minimum there, since we have a lot of traffic that we're anticipating through that area, might be helpful.
Sure, sounds good.
I had a question, and maybe, and again, haven't been on this project from the beginning, so this is maybe something I just don't know. It's about sort of that the transportation area, or the bus stop itself. I'm wondering if in the future, the plans, we can make sure we have that curb line work on the west side, just so we understand, the space that's allocated for circulation on the street side. And then in terms of, you referenced the bus shelter and the retaining wall around it that exists currently, is there an opportunity, as, we're trying to sort of make this work for the best it can work, that we could relocate that existing bus shelter, or do some modifications to that wall in order to have the site better serve us? And then my second question, which is also related to that edge, is the formal ramp and stairs that is shown there. And I understand if it's too early to say this, but even if we did not raise the building, do you think that there is opportunity to potentially resolve that accessibility issue without it being a formal ramp? Because it does create a very strong edge there that maybe could be better utilized for additional bike parking or planting to sort of soften things a little bit.
Good idea.
All really good questions. We've been thinking about this a lot, this edge in particular, and understanding that there's concurrent studies that have been happening as well, kind of just beyond this immediate site. Yeah, to answer some of those, absolutely, we can certainly make sure we have that line work showing in the future. I think we did have it at one point, and we have certainly been mindful of it. I think the idea of that retaining wall and the bus shelter and its sort of existing location is a great question as well. I know certainly if there was an opportunity where the plaza was raised, that would certainly be, I think, looked at and sort of reimagined. Because you're right, I think it's interesting how there's the bus stop here. There's sort of this little, almost like a little tiny retaining wall behind it, but then everybody's kind of coming through and sort of stepping down around this existing tree to get into this area. And then there's just sort of this gradual movement down as it sort of becomes flush where that original entrance was. And so from an accessibility standpoint, we did see it challenging to get away from that ramp. We definitely explored a few scenarios where we had different orientations, but then it was really cutting into that plaza space. I do believe it's currently maxed out at the highest tolerance for slopes for accessibility. I think the location could certainly change. The reason, or maybe one of the ways we landed here was we were sort of working around some existing features. There's some utility poles in the area, and we were trying to be mindful of those, but certainly open to discussion and coordination as we look at this a bit further.
One other comment I had in terms of the accessibility from those parking spots is, do you anticipate there needing to be a formal ramp situation to overcome the 6-inch, I'm assuming that a 6-inch discrepancy or so, or maybe less, between the parking area and the plaza?
We definitely need to look at it more. That's a great point. I think to date, what we've envisioned or what we would love to see is some sort of kind of gradual, or even if there's a way for the parking stalls themselves slope where they kind of meet the grade of the plaza itself. I think the goal would be to not have to have a ramp to connect those spaces. So I think that would be the next level of detail we definitely want to dive into, but I think the goal would be to not have to have a ramp that goes up into the plaza. It would just be flush.
Awesome.
Anything else from anybody? Susan?
I like the cantilevered sails. The design is really modern. But maybe the artwork on the structures, the poles would be helpful. I don't know. it's a really modern look to me, and that's supposed to be an historic area, but maybe there's nothing that can be done about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Absolutely. We could definitely look at that a bit more.
Great, thanks.
And yeah, if others have comments on shade, we would love some feedback on this too. I know there's a strong desire, and curious if folks have additional thoughts on any of these or others.
I'll throw in.
I like the cantilevered because it has fewer posts. That's why I like it.
I'll second that.
So I kind of have similar concerns to Bill with, the 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts that come through. That cantilevered seems like that might be a challenge. And there's fewer posts, but yet there's more structure with that cantilevered. So to me, there's less structure with the option 1 shade sails.
Carl, you're right, but these really have become popular at all these car dealerships. They're so tired of the hail damage, and so they're definitely sized for our wind loading for our area. Now, will they whip aggressively in the wind? Yes. And could, after time, after they've worn out, could they get tears and UV damage? Yes. But they are sized for the wind load.
And all three groups at the community engagement wanted some sort of wind sail. I'm not crazy about any of them actually, but the community came so strongly in support of them that I have to support that.
I would say option 2 would be like a definite no for me, just because of the amount of posts. But that might just be me.
Which is option
The retractable shade with the 3 sort of.
Yeah, the cantilever could be, I mean, what's shown in that image, the steel structure is very modern, bare. I mean, that's something that could be a playful element that gets expressed a little bit differently in terms of how that cantilever works. So there's some good design options there.
Flight 3095 with
Are they all about the same cost?
Passengers are requested to proceed to
We need to dive a little bit deeper into that. I think it definitely varies. With the cantilever one, there, like we said, there's definitely some more structural components where it's actually attaching out, and so I think in general comparable, but we could definitely look into that a bit more and dive deeper.
This is not a question about the shade sails, but it's rather a question for the task force about bike racks. These options are showing a lot of bike racks, and I'm curious, and again, because I've not been on the project as long as y'all, but how many bike racks do we think we need to have here to be successful? Is there an opportunity to, maybe remove a bike rack or 2 in favor of, putting the bike repair in that place, or putting the water fountain in that place, in that space, so that we, can give more room to planting or something like that? Just what is our bike rack quantity that we feel is necessary here?
And I can provide a quick count. So in this option, for instance, we had 14 of those vertical along the north edge of the building, 17 that are on that western edge, and we typically assume you can have a bike on either side, and so that's about 62 bikes that could be held, 31 racks.
And I think our original proposal was for 50, wasn't it, Carl?
Yes, that's correct, but that was going to be shared with Pike Ride, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess the follow-up question to that is, do we feel like they all need to be on the plaza, or is the potential, to maybe tuck them into some other areas within the site so we can get to that number and sort of balance those uses?
I think that's a good point, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any bike lockers or only bike racks?
So we're showing 6 bike lockers on each plan as well. So located down here in the south on number 2 and next to the ramp, and then tucked behind that retaining wall which again, that could even potentially go away or be relocated on option 1.
We did
I don't-
recall, sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
I was just wondering our original proposal for number of bike lockers.
I think it was 6, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so that's what you've met there. Go ahead, Susan, sorry.
I think a consistent message we got from the Plaza meeting was people weren't crazy about having the whole west side lined with bike lockers. They said move those somewhere else on the site. They didn't like the bike lockers all lined up and the bike racks all lined up on the west side. So is there,
I don't think it was the bike lockers. I think it was all the bike accoutrement all lined up like that.
right. Is there a way to move them, Josh?
We can definitely look at that. Yeah, I think it's a great question. I know internally we've talked about other areas as well. You know, we'd even thought about, you know, is there an opportunity on the east side of the building? But I think we ultimately thought there were sort of 2 challenges there. One would be either visibility or awareness, knowing that they're there, and 2 would be kind of the point that Carl brought up earlier. If you're coming from the south or even the west, now you've got to go that much further, potentially walking your bike. And let's face it, we know people won't be doing that to get over to the other side of the plaza. And so there are definitely some challenges, but we're definitely open to trying to explore other areas as well. For some of those safety kind of conflict issues, that's one of the reasons, or perhaps the largest reason why we're kind of leaning towards that west side.
And Susan, I think a lot of it was they didn't originally, when they looked at it, the bike stuff was all aligned on the creek side, and they definitely didn't want it there. So the west is, you know, I can see that there is benefit to putting stuff all together like that. But it is kind of there's just, all I can think of is how hot and industrial, or not industrial, but just, anyway. If there's anything that could break it up just a little bit, I guess. But at least it's on the west side and not along the south side, so that's good.
Well, and to the beginning of this conversation too, it seems like we might even have more than we had initially suggested. And so maybe we can look at it a bit more, and I don't know, maybe there's one option that has a few less bike racks that kind of meets that 50 quota, and we can see what that looks like.
And we talked about putting art on the bike lockers and, you know, stuff like that to kind of just break it up a little. So does anyone else have any final comments or questions, concerns for Josh?
Josh, could you show us again, I guess it's on both plans, the configuration right along the creek, what you have?
Sure. For the first concept, we were looking at some bench seating, and we're thinking, you know, there's plenty of opportunity here, but we wanted to keep it with something unique or sort of custom. You know, this was an image we really liked that we thought was kind of different, just not something, you know, we don't want to do just concrete benches, for instance. We thought there would be an opportunity to provide a little bit of elevation and variation. And so that was this first option here.
Okay.
And then for the second option, this was more of a picnic table approach, you know, seating area, smaller groups. And, you know, the sort of inspiration here was looking at what is across the street in Memorial Park. But, you know, we're thinking that could be something that's a bit more of a traditional seating area.
Okay.
I
really like your benches in the option 1. I think those are cool looking. I'm not crazy about picnic tables, but I think the benches are great.
And I agree. I like those custom benches, you know, the concept of custom benches there. It's much more interesting. Okay, last chance.
And one other question. I noticed on the east side of the building, there's 2 different options between the 2 concepts in terms of planting and benches and stuff. Is that related to grade, or are we just looking at 2 alternatives there?
That's not related to grade. Great catch, Aaron. Yeah, that's just something that's with a little bit of variation. Again, we thought, how do we use this space? Because it felt a little bit dead. And so one was provide seating and queuing for those after an event or maybe before, and then maybe just expanding on pollinator gardens or vegetation.
Because I personally prefer the one with more planting, but that might just be me.
Yeah, I do too.
3.
Okay,
So
with that, I'm
can I ask-
going, oh, what? I'm
Nancy,
sorry.
can you ask one more question? And
Yeah,
this
go ahead.
might be out of scope, but just throw in there. So we had talked about potential of like park benches further along the creek to the east, and this has been focused on the plaza. And so is that because we're only focused on the plaza and that other is another discussion, but you know, the picnic tables further east along the creek, Fountain Creek, I think would be important.
The short answer to that, Carl, is yes, we've been mostly focusing on the plaza to date. And the second part of that is we did look at that when we were looking at the total site. We definitely have some concerns until we had received, just recently that updated survey with where that actual edge is, because we were showing that at one time on some of the concepts when we were looking at the entire site, but we're a little bit concerned that that's a pretty steep drop off and there might not be the room for that there.
Okay.
Good question, Carl. Okay, I can't see all of you, so hopefully that's the end of the questions for today. I'm going to turn it over to Dole and leave you all, and you guys can decide if you want as a task force to go on to the next 2 topics or hold them on till next week. So Dole, take it away, and I'm out of here. I'll see you next week. Thanks.
Bye, Nancy.
Hey, Joel, what are next steps on the plaza design? What do we do now? What's
Well,
do you make?
let's see,
make them-
Josh, it sounds like that you've heard some tweaks from us today. I think that you make those tweaks and then send them back to us. And then Susan, I think that because we've decided that doesn't, because we just want to give an FYI to the community about what we're thinking about that those final concepts for the plaza.
Well, I think for the community, we need to have, at this point, we haven't decided between the 2 concepts that Josh gave us. So I think we need to have a concept in mind and that we communicate to the public rather than say we're still looking at 2 of them.
Okay, well, we have, go ahead, Aaron.
So we had invited Jillian and Megan to this meeting, but they had other conflicts. So I've sent out, we're gonna have a meeting with them just to get their input as well, since from a management of this plaza space and what it would need from their perspective. So we might include some additional concept or comments to you, Josh, on Monday that incorporate their expertise. So just kind of an FYI there.
Great.
Well,
Yeah,
am I off base? Do you guys agree that we should have one plaza concept instead of multiple concepts that we take to the community?
Yes.
Yeah, we've already gone through, yes. I mean, I think that's appropriate. And I thought we were gearing up for that, Susan, on that November 30th meeting.
No, we're not. Well, okay.
Not without the knowing if we're raising or lowering the building, even though it
That's
maybe
right.
doesn't change the concept drastically, we want to make sure we've got full disclosure.
Right. I think we've established that.
Yep.
That we
So it
won't
would
do
be on
anything
November
until we
30th,
know.
It might be December.
Right. Well, Susan, how do you think we should communicate this to the community then? The single preferred concept?
Well, I mean, we can communicate with drawings and all kinds of stuff. Like my point, and I guess I'm not communicating clearly, is I think it's important to take one plaza concept to the community and not communicate. We're still making up our minds on the concept. We need to take our preferred concept to the community on November 30th or whenever we go to the community.
Sure.
So how are we as a task force going to decide which concept we like better?
Okay, I see your question. You're task force specific.
Yes.
Well, I think what Nancy was just proposing is that we would increase our frequency to weekly, and we'll get Megan and Jillian's comments on Monday.
Okay.
Josh has some stuff, he'll make his revisions, and then I think Susan will keep meeting weekly and via emails until we as a task force are confident in that concept.
Okay, so
And
this
we could,
will come back to us again. Okay.
yeah. Oh yeah, yes, it'll come back to us again. I think that some of the questions we asked of you, Josh, are fairly easy to answer, and some of them I think are not as easy to answer. And so, Susan, I think we keep discussing it until we're confident and we can support the concept. Absolutely. Yes, I did. Yes, I misunderstood your question as well.
That's okay, no worries. Good, okay.
And, yeah, so I think we probably need to go ahead and get the calendar for next Thursday, and then we got to let Judy know so she can get that meeting published. And we got to get the agenda published. Hey, Bill, we're getting a lot of feedback from you still.
So let's take our stuff over to the other.
Susan, does that answer your question? I think this is
Yeah.
really, really important, and we need to take as many iterations as it takes to get it right.
You can do the wire.
And in the meantime, maybe Todd and his team will have some answers about the grading.
Okay.
Yeah, from today's meeting and the plans that we saw that Josh presented, I think there's, the simplification of the shade structures. And can anyone mute Bill?
I can't. I'm not the.
All right. Well, then hang it up, huh?
So I think we heard some a preference for the cantilever shade structure. I think we heard some preference for some bench seating. So I think the two options that Josh presented today are starting to coalesce into a single option. So I think Josh and his team were gonna kind of refine those. I think they're also starting to work on some 3D visuals as well. So that's our deliverable was going to be some renderings of the final concept plan. But obviously the elevation change, the earthwork change is going to take some time to resolve. But I think we're pretty close on the concept plan for the plaza, is at least how I interpreted today's conversation. And Josh, you can tell me otherwise.
No, absolutely. I think you guys gave some great feedback today. And I think, as Dole said, we've got a few things we know we can change. We might get a few more comments as you guys digest over the next few days. And it's probably going to mold us into one concept, which is that preferred. I think the biggest caveat that we all know is just what is going to be that elevation, because that starts to change some of the connections and sort of the exterior as we sort of understand it. So, from a plan perspective, I don't think there's much that changes other than those few tweaks. But, of course, 3-dimensionally speaking, if we want to show, and we want to show that to the public so they can get a feel of this place, that's going to be heavily reliant on whether this plaza, the building, are raised or if it were to stay the same. So,
would it be fair to say in terms of 3-dimensional renderings, those would be delivered after we have an earthwork direction because of what you mentioned in terms of how it might feel different, or no?
I think a lot does depend on that. I mean, we can certainly start to, as Todd mentioned, we've already started getting into the 3-dimensional world, and we can start providing some of that information. But that ultimately, if we decide everything's getting raised up, how those views will look start to change a lot, right? Especially if we're looking at sort of a bird's eye perspective to give folks an idea of what the plaza looks like. So we can definitely share things in progress along the way, but yes, I think we are fairly reliant if we're going to present sort of a polished product to the public on whether we're going to raise it or keep it lower. But we'll keep working on it in the meantime. There are definitely things we know that will stay the same, and we can make some of those adjustments. So we're happy to share progress along the way.
Okay. Susan, does that fully answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Looks like the next thing on the agenda is the sustainability discussion, but I think we can table that. I think we'll have to have that discussion once we have some more of those plaza details. Is there anything else anyone would want to discuss today? Yeah, Susan.
Well, we were also supposed to discuss the community open house and the intent, whether is it going to be public information or public engagement. And I would suggest we delay that conversation for next
Okay.
week. Yeah.
Okay. I think we can do that. Okay. So we can wrap up the meeting. Josh and Todd. So, and to whoever's interested, I did some more drawing on the survey showing how the topography ties in to the finished floor elevations, just so that everyone kind of knows what I'm trying to say. So if you guys don't care, you're welcome to hop off. Otherwise, I'm just going to share my screen real quick and walk through what I've done so that we're all talking the same language. I think you guys can see that.
Mhm.
So the green lines and the green contours represents if we do not raise the building where we are level with the existing site. So the existing site, we are in a sump, like the building is much lower. We're like in a sag, we're like in a sump around us. So if the green is if we do not raise up the building, that's about where we'll tie in to match existing grade, all things being equal. The red line represents if we raise the building up a foot and a half, that's how much out of the sump will come and will tie in at about to those contours. So, boy, Bill, if I could mute you, I would. I tried. I'm not the meeting host, so I can't do it.
Please reserve the overhead net space for larger.
Oh, he's even on the airplane.
Once we do begin the boarding
So,
process.
but my point is that the green, if we don't raise the building, that's basically flat. Now we would want to have some pitch for drainage and that kind of thing. And then red is if we raise the building a foot and a half where we would tie in. So the reason why we're even analyzing the earthwork was because raising the building up allows the site to operate in a much flatter condition overall than just the more restrictive green contour. So anyway, that's Josh, we'll let you guys do some more of your analysis, but that's why I brought it up earlier, was because it offers other site function benefits where we are almost, we talked about the west side being difficult. If we raise the building up a foot and a half, we almost tie in at the exact same grade as that west side, which means that we would only have to really account for some drainage through there. Otherwise, that whole plaza operates almost level from the elevation of the building to the curb cut, which is pretty envious. It was a pretty nice situation. And then the east side isn't as important. It is, but it's just a parking lot.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, everyone that are still here. Thank you guys. And Josh, do you know how much time you think Aaron just set up a meeting. We're going to meet internally on Monday. We'll maybe try to send you some additional comments from that meeting. And then we're planning to meet again next Thursday. If you were able to have those revisions to us by then, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think we can make that work. It just depends on when we get comments from you guys, but assuming it's Monday or something like that, I think we can make those tweaks.
If you haven't met Erin, she does things quickly and efficiently. So I expect that we will have them to you by close of business Monday. Okay, Erin, you're obligated.
And if needed, I think there's quite a bit to discuss regarding the public open house. So if that's the focus of next week's meeting, I feel like that might be okay too. It just kind of depends.
Sure.
So.
Okay, everyone. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh.
Bye.
Thank you, Dole. Thank you, Aaron. Safe travels, Bill.
Mary Gaston, please come to the guest center step for left behind veil.
I'm not gonna worry. Yeah. I never.
May I have your attention, please? Passenger Hannah Cobb, please return to Bob's store for left behind item. Hannah Cobb.
I would. Please.
Class, are you for traveling outbound? Flight 38 Dallas with segregation behind. Class, are you for? Please recheck and gate behind.
No, I could have.
We're in the parking lot.
Yes, no, I just had a sight line. It's halfway to the west. Yeah, yeah. Get out of the- Oh, I know. Right.
We now go one.
Linda.
morning. Now, like, make sure that our phone breakfast is not all the way from the morning test. Make sure that it's going to be for Group 5 are welcome to board flight 1638 to Dallas Fort Worth through the main boarding lane. I have your attention, please. I have your attention, please. For Peter Robert, Claiborne, or the driver, the white color 2004 Cadillac, DeVille, Parker. Turn back to your vehicle for the law enforcement. And have your attention, please. Have your attention, please. For Peter Robert, Claiborne, or the driver, the white color 2004 Cadillac, DeVille, Parker. Attended. Please turn back to your vehicle for the law enforcement. Thank you. We now welcome our advantage veteran, Group 6, board flight 1638 to Dallas Fort Worth. Oh, no, good job. Oh, yeah. Look at that. We're all. Been a long day. Third day. Sorry. Yeah. Last one now? Yeah, last one. They want to go to their airline. Dallas. Full carry license. Start the carry license. Collect the overhead cost. Place the bag. Wheels go first on the side. Appreciate that. Pull back my bag. Have the equipment underneath the seat in front of you. You need any assistance, please let us know. Yeah, well, they want. If you want to sit in an exit, please review the safety card in the seat pocket. You may need to open the exit in an emergency. Let a flight attendant know if you're unwilling, unable, or do not need the exit from.
If you are sitting in an exit seat, please review the safety card in the seat pocket. You may need to open the exit in an emergency. Let a flight attendant know if you are unwilling to operate the exit or do not meet the exit seat requirements.
have to.
you started our boarding process a little bit later than expected. If you're in the aisle, please have a row as quickly as possible. I know everyone wants to get to Dallas as quickly as possible today. So if you're in the aisle, ABC is on your right hand side, BEF is on your left. If you can't find any more room for your bigger roller sports in the overtime department, and have some room back here and towards the back in row 33. Again, please step into that row.
Want me to try to put that up?
Will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
You want me to put your backpack up?
Yeah, let's put it on. What do you want to do? You'll figure about that.
I think
Yeah, let's.
I've had enough for now.
Yeah.
Grab my juice.
Yeah.
Unless somebody can't. You want to get over to the aisle?
Sure. Sort of cost the phone.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is. It's the cheap piece. Oh, guess I have to
You got it.
Yeah. So you can,
There you go.
oh yeah, you can, sleep if you can. So Austin sent another note, he said they're gonna keep her in the hospital another night, so they think the 10 o'clock.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
Well, I'm not real enthused yet because I remember with my dad, and of course, yes, he's a lot older, but you know, they kept giving him antibiotics and giving him antibiotics.
Yeah.
They couldn't kick it.
Well, that's
That's what she said.
there we go.
Did you get yours on?
Oh, no, yeah.
This says, well, great question. Going to hold Lauren another day, but they think I have the antibiotic style here. So that means the correct thing.
Ladies and gentlemen from the front office, good evening. Welcome aboard. Thanks for joining us. We're done up here. They're done loading cargo and bags down. Probably off the gate here in just a few minutes. Should be a good ride. We just came to Dallas. It was a good ride. No further than a there is some weather going across Georgia, but just keep across it for so far above it. You only see the tops. It's very nighttime, so that doesn't really affect our ride every day. Flight time. Let's see, 902 miles. It's going to take us over 2 hours, 2 hours, 24 minutes scheduled flight time. And the weather in Dallas is just real fun. Something to it is here. Whether you're staying in Dallas or passing out through the Dallas border and Ashburn towards that, it's really traffic tonight. So you shouldn't have any problems making any kind of connection. So Just to tell you what aspects, always wear your seatbelt whenever you're seated. You sound like me. The seatbelt sign is on. Be seated and fasten your seatbelt.
Who brought her pizza?
The boarding door is now closed. Please turn off and put away laptop computers and any other large electronic devices. Also, please be reminded that any small handheld electronic devices, such as tablets, and smartwatches, may be used, but they must be placed in airplane mode. Your camp has a detachable keyboard. The keyboard must be detached. Appreciate your cooperation with this request. Flight attendants, on doors and cross-check stand by for.
I can move there.
That's what I just said. Honey?
Yeah.
My preference, the more you make the coffee.
Okay, well, if that's available. Let me,
All right.
can I get out?
Oh, you can sit out there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Welcome aboard. Today you are where I am excited to get to the people next to you. Let us know how we can help as we get used to it. I'm ready for takeoff. Your safety is important to us. Please pause for a moment and give your attention to the flight.
Welcome to your American Airlines flight on its way to one of our many destinations across the globe. Made possible by our dedicated team members who all do it for one reason, you. That's why your safety and well-being are so important to us. Let go through some flight instructions. We get you safely on your way. First, make sure your seat is upright. All larger electronic devices put away and a table stowed. Seat back device holders must be stowed for taxi, takeoff, and landing. If you have a carry-on, place it all the way under the seat in front of you. Larger carry-on luggage goes in the overhead bin. If you have small handheld devices, such as cell phones, tablets, and smartwatches, please send them there. If your electronic device falls into your seat, please do not adjust the seat and contact the crew member for assistance. If you are seated at an overwing exit, your window shade must remain open for taxi, takeoff, and landing. If you haven't already fastened your seatbelt, insert the metal end into the buckle and pull the strap so it's tight across your hips. To open your seatbelt, lift the top of the buckle. And remember, seatbelts should be fastened whenever you're seated in case of unexpected turbulence. U.S. law requires compliance with lighted and posted signs and crew member instructions. All flights are non-smoking, including e-cigarettes, vape devices, and smokeless tobacco. It's against the law to tamper with, disable, or destroy the lavatory smoke detectors. Doing so may result in a fine. For safety reasons, e-cigarettes and vape devices may not be plugged into any power source while on board the airplane. The safety card in your